I thought I was dying. It was so unbelievably painful, 4 days. And the bleeding, the just visually what I saw, the hormonal cliff, the emotional drop was, I mean, it's hard to articulate, but I think it was really, for me, it felt really important to speak authentically to that experience.
You guys, I do not get on a flight anymore without my Bombas compression socks. They are a travel staple for me, especially on longer flights. The socks help improve blood flow from your legs to your heart, which obviously is so essential. I just love these socks so much, and I want you guys to have an opportunity to check out these socks too. So use our code QTC20 for 20% off your first purchase of Bombas. I am so excited, Chelsea, to have you here on Quiet the Clock. I've been looking forward to this conversation, and I have lots of things I want to talk about. But first and foremost, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited. So a lot of the things, and maybe you can tell by the title of the podcast that we talk about, is sort of owning your own authentic path, sort of trying to drown out unhelpful or misaligned narratives, societal expectations, and you have seemed to have done that. You know, just from what I've seen and kind of researched, you're a DJ, you're an activist, you're an entrepreneur, you're a mother. And so to me, it seems like you have kind of carved your own path. And I'm curious to hear more about that. And if you were always encouraged to kind of follow passions, or were there some other narratives that maybe shaped decisions or choices?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I feel when I actually look at how I was raised and perhaps the type of education that I was privileged enough to have, I was definitely encouraged to be myself and get to know myself. And I think that is a real privilege, because I don't think everybody has the opportunity or the luxury to be able to do that, because for so many people it's like survival. And, some people I think get lucky, and some people really find that alignment in life, where they're perhaps born with a very specific gift. Like they might be very, musically gifted and might have a beautiful voice, or they might just be an incredible artist and then they go on to make a living like that. But I think, I think I grew up in a very liberal and sort of both, my parents are very bohemian, and I think they are both creatives and really encouraged me to be creative and sent me to a very creative school. And the school that I went to, which was very liberal as well, was really all about teaching children to become themselves. And yeah.
I love that. I feel like we should be doing that everywhere. Yeah. And I grew up quite differently. It's probably why I found myself talking about these things now, where I love that. I think that is so beautiful. That was not encouraged here in my household, in our community. It was really sort of like, the saying, check the boxes, take the classes, apply for these schools. And so I love that. And I'm sure you appreciate this too. Like, my son has just started preschool. And so we're thinking a lot about,
what sort of education.
Yeah. And I want him to have, and we'll certainly do it here in our home, but I want him to have that sort of the encouragement to find himself and understand what his gifts are.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's so interesting because in many ways, the grass is always greener. And I can look at certain ways that I was raised and think, it would have been better if I had been pushed to go after a more traditional education. And, I went to acting school. I didn't go to university, which is something that, now I not all the time, but sometimes I wish I had. And I think in the US, the the educational system is very different to the UK, in that when you go to university, you still have to keep up other subjects as well. So you do tend to have much, you leave school with a much sort of broader knowledge around these different subjects, whereas, in the UK, people just go on to study one specific subject. So, like the grass is always greener. And I
I
think
find so interesting because I guess sort of similar, but like a little bit later on. So for us in the United States, I mean, I've been out of college a long time now, so maybe it's different, but you're supposed to declare a major by junior year. And I'm thinking back, like I was, you're 18 years old. How do you know what you want to do or what you want to study for?
Totally.
Yeah.
But that's why, in a way, I think the approach should be very, if we can encourage children to be themselves from an early age, then perhaps we can help guide them, as to a kind of type of education that is best suited to them. Because obviously some people are very dyslexic. Some people need extra care around certain things. A lot of the time it's like figuring out how somebody learns. And I think that, but look, there's so many different angles to look at this. And I think one of the interesting sides, which I definitely had growing up, was I was encouraged to give things a go. And I haven't been, listen, we're all afraid of failure, but I think some people are really, really hindered by the idea of going for something and then not succeeding. Whereas I think that I have been very lucky in the fact that I'll give something a go and I'll put myself out there. And, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Perhaps why I'm now an entrepreneur.
I know it takes a special breed to do this.
Yeah, you've got to be like totally batshit crazy to do it, I think. But yeah, I think giving children the space to explore and to try things. I was really fortunate growing up that I got to try clarinet classes. I got to try a piano. I got to try different, studying different languages. So I think that's really important, to be able to introduce children to sort of different colors and different shades of life, just to see what might resonate for them.
I love you. I live by that too, trying. And in my work as a therapist, that's what I encourage my clients to do too, is to try. And one of my questions to you was, how did you have the courage to, make these bold moves? And you moved to New York, and you obviously started your company and so many other things in between. But it sounds like it was ingrained in you to try, which I think is so wonderful. And in my work, I see a lot of people afraid to try, but then also so stuck.
Yeah, the being stuck is such an interesting piece as to sort of where that comes from, because I think it can derive from so many different sort of facets of life. But I think, in a way, I was very lucky in the sense of growing up and being able to have, as we just kind of discussed, just that opportunity to try different things, which, is obviously a huge privilege. And, I had a very comfortable environment from a kind of love perspective. I very much felt encouraged and loved by my parents, which is, I think, probably the biggest gift you can give a child. But I grew up with an older sister who was extremely unwell, and she suffers with very, very extreme epilepsy, a condition that I also suffer from myself, but I have very varying degrees of it. And so I grew up in a very high stress environment. So whilst I had all of these, just like other incredible things happening with regards to like feeling very loved by my parents, feeling very encouraged, being able to try different things. I also spent a lot of my childhood, in intensive care with my sister, who we were told wouldn't live past 18. And, she has daily seizures. She can have like 70, 100 seizures a day. And she was,
oh my gosh,
as a child, she was hospitalized at least 3 times a year. And so I think, I was very much like living in this fight or flight mode, which in a way I'm able to now see as a gift, whilst like these are our wounds and a lot of our challenges come from these experiences that we have as children. I think simultaneously it was a gift, because I think probably experiencing just these extremities of life from such a young age, these really traumatic kind of day-to-day life moments, I think probably allowed that side of me to blossom, which is just like giving things a go and not being really, because it sort of puts life into perspective a bit.
Totally. Oh my gosh, absolutely.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
and then those are the things that become ingrained in you, sort of the trying, the resiliency sort of perspective on life at a young age, instead of, the difference of having those things ingrained in you versus like you have to go to college, you have to get a job, you have to get married, you have to have babies. Like, it does set a different course, I think.
definitely. It's like, you know what? Life is short. And you got to kind of go for things that are interesting or are going to potentially make you happy. I think that was the kind of sentiment of it. And, you mentioned that word resilience. And I think that is a sort of a key part of all of this, whether you call it resilience or grit or whatever it might be called. But I think, yeah, that's definitely something that I now see as a gift. And I think I think that's just a big kind of challenge and sort of interesting work to do in life, is to sort of look at our, just like our biggest wounds, our hardest moments, our challenges, and sort of say, well, yes, okay, they have probably wounded us or caused damage in some ways, but how are we sort of turning them into light? And everything on the side and a sort of a lighter side, doesn't it?
That's so, I mean, that was, well, I'll ask you here, but that was one of the questions I wanted to wrap up with, because there's obviously so much more to talk about, but I couldn't agree more with what you just said. And I'm living that now, and I can share with you in what way. But I know you've had your own fertility journey. I have saw the trailer for your documentary with your sister. There have been a lot of, which is beautiful, by the way, beautiful. And so I want to get into all that stuff. But my question I was going to end with for you was, do you see all the hardship and the wounds now? And I think this is what you're saying, as purposeful, as putting you on the path into places where you should be. And I'll share for myself, I'm going through secondary infertility right now. And I did start this podcast, about more societal timelines and egg freezing. And so we were talking a lot about fertility on here. We talk a lot about fertility on here. And then I found myself in this space of infertility. And it has been, as you know, so extremely painful. But the one thing I hang on to is I have so much to speak to now. I can relate so much. I have a lot I want to share and I want to say. And so as painful as it's been, I'm trying to find the purpose in that.
Can I ask you a question? Did you, in terms of your timeline, did you start this podcast and were you starting to talk about these topics before you experienced your secondary infertility?
Yep.
How interesting is that?
Yeah. It's been, yeah. So my journey is sort of really feeling the pressure of the societal timelines. I was 34 when I met my partner, which, like, by societal standards is so late. I froze my eggs at 37, got pregnant at 39. So I kind of never lined up with those timelines. And so I knew sort of the angst that caused me. And then I was hearing it from so many other women in my therapy practice. I'm like, we have to have conversations around this. And it was a lot around, our biological clock and freezing our eggs to preserve our fertility and not meeting a partner and comparison, all these things. So that is what the podcast was born out of. And I was
hence the name.
hence the name. And then, I started experiencing the secondary infertility. But what I'll also say is that I was so quickly resourced because I've had guests on here talking about things. So I knew who to reach out to for help when everything started to happen. So that's, I guess, another silver lining.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And obviously, as somebody that has experienced my own set of challenges in that area, I feel you very deeply. And also, it's very admirable. And I take my hat off to you for creating this podcast and having these conversations, because I think sometimes when you're going through it, it's sort of interesting. It's kind of easy to think that everyone is experiencing it because you're so focused on the conversations, and I, from my experience, I found that I just wanted to speak to other people who understood it. But I think when you zoom out and you take a bit more of a kind of, a macro lens to it, it really is crazy how taboo these topics still are. And the fact that, we aren't having these conversations enough. And so obviously that's one of the reasons that I really wanted to come on today, because I love what you're doing, and
thank you.
It's such an important topic. And I really, really genuinely believe that we find healing through community, through sharing our story, through listening to other people's stories, through giving other people platforms. And what I will also say on that is I love the way that you have included in your focus on these topics, women that are looking for partners as well, because it sits very closely, and it's so often overlooked, because it's like, oh, well, you're not having, fertility challenges, or you're not going through IVF, or you haven't experienced miscarriage. And actually, I have quite a lot of friends who are, who haven't met a partner, some who, are not fussed about it, and that's fine. And some who, are deeply, deeply sad that they haven't met someone. And I think we need to create a lot more space for people who are experiencing that, because they haven't even had the opportunity to start trying yet.
I know.
I love it. As well as same-sex couples as well. I was speaking to a friend recently, and she was talking to me about the challenges of the, costs for IVF, which she cannot afford, and just how, exclusive the offerings are for same-sex couples. And it's just so interesting having that conversation. And she's like, I can't even try, I can't even just try.
Well, yeah, oh my gosh, and because you think about, for same-sex couples, like even in that waiting, you can be trying, whether you're like in between a retrieval or IUI, but there's months where, and then you still feel like, okay, I'm doing something about it, because if it's your desire, it's on your mind all the time, and you want to be constantly.
You want to be contributing to some, even if you've been trying for 2 years, you still want that opportunity. So, I think there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of like broadening out these conversations.
Absolutely.
And just to remember, everybody that is struggling within, and it's the same energy, it's the same sentiment. So anyway, we're going on a tangent, but
no, that's fine. I love that. No, I think all these, and that's why I like to be more inclusive about what we talk about, because it isn't just related to fertility. It's the emotions around not having the thing you want when you want it, or also the turmoil of like, I should have this, I don't, but do I actually want it? So it's like, it's more about the emotions that come into play when you're feeling these things. And that can apply to like a career you want, or a desire, or a partnership, whatever it is. I think a lot of the same emotions and feelings that come up apply.
Yeah. And I think it's just like feeling isolated within that, and you become so fixated on, these painful issues that it can become really, really lonely. And that's why, I always speak to community as, I think my number one, I don't want to say necessarily solution, but, place to go for healing. And my company, Looni, which, I know we'll come on to speak to, but we're a hormonal health and wellness company, and we have a really beautiful, which I would love you to join personally.
Oh, I would love to. Yes.
We have a beautiful online community set up, which is hosted on WhatsApp. So it's super easy to join. It's free to join. We've just segmented out the community, and the conversations are, focused on, we have a group that's focused on chronic menstrual health conditions like endometriosis, PCOS, fibroids, etc. We have a trying to conceive group. And then we have a pregnancy loss
Mm.
space as well. And I started this community because I went through my own challenges, with endometriosis, which I of course still have,
Yeah.
but also with pregnancy loss. And my my issues were actually not about becoming pregnant. I would get pregnant, but my body wouldn't be able to hold on to the
Yep.
pregnancy.
Yeah.
And I had an ectopic pregnancy, and honestly, community is really what saved me and lifted me up and supported me. And I'm so grateful to that community. And I think, I had started a community, gosh, almost about 8 years prior, which was to support mothers of children with epilepsy, but also women with epilepsy. And so, I had this experience building community there, and it's just incredible the magic that happens
Mm-hmm.
together over these shared challenges. It really is, from sharing resources to emotional support, just the power of identification. It's so
Yeah. Relatability, someone that gets it and understands it. Yeah,
totally.
absolutely. It's interesting to hear. Just it was almost like all of your experiences were laying the foundation to where you are now in terms of like using a challenge for purpose, creating community support and help. And you did that with the epilepsy and now with fertility. It's amazing. Yeah, community is so important. That's my biggest goal with this podcast too, is just community and bringing people together and helping remove the isolation and the loneliness. Because I couldn't believe how many similar narratives and stories I was hearing as a therapist. I'm like, we're all going through this. And I think one of the things I wanted to obviously talk about in your fertility journey, many things. One of them was for someone that experienced a miscarriage, I was so grateful. I'm going to get upset. I was so grateful for how you explained it in the article, because I think we shy away from these really hard topics. But like, I was so unprepared for what happened to my body during my miscarriage. And even my doctor told me it'd be like a heavy period. And what you wrote was just was it. Like, that's exactly what happened. And we need to be talking about these things, because I was just blindsided.
I mean, it was that the Vogue piece that
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I really wanted to speak to the actual experience, because, as you just pointed out so clearly, your doctor said it would be like a heavy period. Well, it might be like a heavy period for some people, but for a lot of people, it is not. I mean, I thought I was dying. It was so unbelievably painful.
Mm-hmm.
4 days, and the bleeding, the just visually what I saw,
Mm-hmm.
the hormonal cliff, the emotional drop was. I mean, it's hard to articulate, but I think it was really, for me, it felt really important to speak authentically to that experience. And as you said, you were able to read that and be prepared. And I think, again, I come back to the fact that these topics are taboo. People don't want to hear from women. They don't want to hear about the gruesome facts, and I think, often, whether we're having a termination or if you're having a DNC, and then this is not to sort of diminish the pain that comes with that, because it's, I've had a termination myself, and it is equally painful in different ways. But it is very different to go in for that procedure versus being at home and really seeing everything and experiencing everything. And I think even in my case, where at the time my boyfriend was very much like there supporting me, he had no idea what I was seeing when I was going to the bathroom. I told him, as much as I could in those moments, but unless you are right there experiencing it,
Yeah.
it's pretty shocking, to see your
It's
body break.
terrifying. It's terrifying. I was like on my way to, on my way to the ER. I thought it was like my insides were, it was just really,
And I just remember thinking, people throw around miscarriage so sort of flippantly, so nonchalantly. And I just remember being like, this is a life-changing experience.
oh,
And
yeah.
after I experienced that, it was almost like I felt that I had joined this very sad club that I didn't really want to be a part of, but it just made me have an even deeper respect and admiration for women and what we go
Oh my
through.
God.
And I
Yeah.
remember walking down the street and just sort of thinking, wow, like, have you had a miscarriage? Like, it was like this respect that I had for women that
Oh
had
my God. I know.
it's like you think before, but like,
No clue. And I worked with before I even had so many women that have like been warriors. And I like texted every single one of them. I'm like, because I've gone through, for compared to some, like, and no comparison here. It's all so awful. But yeah, I had this similar feeling like, wow, how strong, how resilient, what warriors, like, because this is just so painful. And it's, I remember having the thought,
it's really, really brutal.
brutal. Yeah.
But you know what? Like, looking at there's, as we were just alluding to, this shadow side of everything in life and this lighter side. But like, wow, that made me resilient as a woman, as a human. Like,
Mm-hmm.
out of that really feeling, once I emotionally built myself back up again, I felt, for me, it was like I became even more ready for what life was going to throw at me. And I've been really fortunate to go on to have a baby boy, and it definitely has made me a better mother, 100%. I think about it a lot in how it's impacted different sort of verticals of motherhood for me.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's my approach to breastfeeding, or sleepless nights, or just the love and the energy and the way I show up for him. The gratitude is like, it's I'm unable to articulate it, but
Oh,
it's
I get it. Yeah, I know. And I think that's so important a few things that you said are so important to really, for me, highlight is one, taking the time to be proud of ourselves, taking the time to reflect on how strong we've been, or how, I don't know, successful in different ways. I think we lose sight of that a lot, especially if we're stuck in what we don't have, what we should have, all these sort of really unhelpful narratives. I have countless times asked clients, like, tell me something you're proud of.
yeah.
And they just have no answer. And so I love that you said, like, that you had this moment where you acknowledge your own strength. And I think also what you said too about the gratitude you have now and how it's affected different verticals of motherhood is so important to touch on too, because we get so hung up on timelines, but it all really makes sense when we really step back and look at it. And I look at, for me, being a mother at 40, even though like 37 to or 36 to 39, not knowing where I would land with that was so incredibly hard. But now having my son at 40, I'm like, well, this all makes sense. This was
Mhm.
exactly how it was supposed to be.
Mhm.
This was the timing. I'm also a better mother for it. I am more present. I am more patient. I am more
Mhm.
engaged. More in gratitude. And I think back to like my 30-something-year-old self, and I'm like, not that I wouldn't be a good mother, but I don't think I could be all the things I am
But
now.
yeah, that's really beautiful. And I think that you have just voiced that so beautifully, just the idea of divine timing. And sometimes it's easy to get bogged down with, yeah, but I wish that this would, and it had happened at that specific moment, because
Yeah.
that I feel would have made more sense, but actually it is not really for us to say. And I think, as somebody that considers themselves to be a spiritual person with a very strong belief system, and that really was one of the other things that carried me through. And I think it was really hard at the moments when I felt like I wasn't going to get what I was longing for so much, which was, to be a mother and to have that opportunity. But I think, similarly to you, just like the timing of everything made so much sense for me. And I genuinely know that had I not have experienced those challenges, I don't think I would have been the mother that I am able to be today. And I think just always, everybody is different, and it's interesting because I started this community. We obviously had some of the, our OG members who were there from the beginning, and a few of them have been fortunate enough to go on to have children, and a lot of them have left the group, which I absolutely understand. And sometimes going through something very painful and traumatic, they just want to kind of move on. And it's interesting how as human beings we're all different, and it's not to sort of say that there's any right or wrong, but for me and the way I feel about it, because I can feel that pain like it was yesterday.
Yeah.
That has made me want to continue to have these conversations. And, maybe for me, it's also different. I have a women's health company, and this is what I do.
Yes. I do want to get to that. But one other thing I wanted to touch on, which you've brought up, this sort of just this idea that these topics are taboo, and we're still not talking about them enough. One of the things I found, and I'm curious to know through your journey, is because there's not a lot of conversations, whether they're not happening in your doctor's office or, on certain platforms. I do think we're moving in a good direction. It's getting better. I was so misinformed. I was so uneducated on my fertility health. There was so much I didn't know, and there were so many moments through my journey, even now, after everything I've been through, that I'm like, why didn't anyone tell me this? And I'm curious if you kind of had a similar experience as you were going through your own fertility journey of like, why didn't I know? Or I'm also curious because this comes up quite a bit. It happens quite a bit where endometriosis goes undiagnosed for so long. And I wonder if that was also something you experienced.
I mean, yes to all of it, and it's unfortunately not just about fertility, and it's not just about menstrual health. This is, a fundamental issue that we have within the medical system. And it comes down to medical misogyny, ultimately. And I often say this, as women, we are starting off from a knowledge, body deficit. We are not taught about our bodies. We do not understand how they are working. We're not talking about these issues. We were excluding women from clinical trials until 1993. We are still not putting enough funding behind women's health when it comes to research. There is a huge shift. Obviously I suffer from endometriosis, and there's definitely a really positive shift that's been happening in the last few years, and a lot of fantastic research that is now taking place. But it's funny, you look behind the veil, and it's female doctors who are leading it, and oftentimes with the condition. And it's like we have to get to the point where these scientists who experience these issues firsthand are the ones that are like pushing the needle forward when it comes to research. So yes, unfortunately, I agree with you. There are so many layers to it, but it all comes down to education. So if we can educate young girls, young women, or young menstruators about what a healthy cycle looks like before they even start you know,
Yes.
menstrual cycle, I think that would be transformative, because then when they experience, you know, uncontrollable cravings, debilitating low moods where they feel that they can't get themselves out of bed, when their menstrual pain, they are lying on the floor with, unbelievably intense cramps, whether they're covered in acne, they will know that this is not normal, rather than the narrative that our generation were told, which is, oh, my mother, my grandmother, they experience this. It's in the family, oh, we suffer from bad periods, or, oh, you're just hormonal. That's why you feel crazy.
Yeah.
Instead, this is an indication that there is an imbalance. Let's figure it out. Let's take an integrative approach and a holistic approach to understanding what we can do to support this hormonal imbalance. And I think, we need to educate physicians on, menstrual health, conditions like endometriosis, signs of perimenopause, all of it. Yeah. We need to educate physicians on how to talk to women about, abortion, about pregnancy loss. We need to become more mindful about signs of ectopic. I mean, I went to the emergency room in England because I was spotting during my pregnancy, and I asked them if they thought I might be having an ectopic pregnancy.
Yes.
And they sent me away. They said, "Madam, if you were having an ectopic pregnancy, you would be seriously ill right now." And the next day I was rushed into emergency surgery to have my fallopian tube removed.
That makes me so frustrated, because the whole word, as you're sharing your thoughts on this, is so many words, but one is dismissive. And I feel like, and I have experienced, being dismissed, or kind of like, no, you don't need that, or no, and so much being overlooked. And it is so frustrating. I'm so sorry you had that experience, but I think often we need, at least I have felt like, I went down so many rabbit holes and read all the books and did all the things after my first miscarriage. And my partner was like, you're overwhelming yourself. You need to stop. And I was like in tears. I've said this story so many times, but I was like, I didn't have questions before. I didn't know enough to have questions. I didn't ask anything. My first transfer, I had no questions, because I just blindly trusted these doctors, didn't listen to my gut, ignored my gut. And what I know now is I would have never done that first transfer.
But what's interesting is you made the point of ignoring your gut. And I think that we have disempowered women to trust themselves. And we are such intuitive beings. Mm-hmm. That's really the gift of feminine energy. I think that we are able to have this inner voice. And I think that, this is not your fault that you didn't trust yourself. I think that we, as I say, I think we have disempowered women to trust that. And I've had so many moments where that inner voice was there, and for some reason I kind of lost sight of it. Whether that was, I waited 10 years to receive a diagnosis for endometriosis, which is on par with the average diagnosis time. And I kept saying to my physician, something isn't right. I knew I shouldn't be passing out and vomiting and being hospitalized from menstrual pain. I knew that wasn't normal. But when you're told for 10 years by your general practitioner, by your physician, that your pain is normal and it's part and parcel of being a woman, and that you should suck it up and take synthetic hormones, and that other women are experiencing this. And then also you're also feeling this awkwardness, this inability for a physician to really sort of deeply drop in and talk about it in a kind of just like removing any sort of taboo nature. You can feel this energy around menstruation, or and I really want to think that younger women are experiencing just their experience around talking about these topics with their physician are very, very different today.
I hope so.
But I think that's why I talk about it being so multi-layered. Like there are so many different layers to this that really need unpacking when we talk about it. And I could talk about it for
same. I know. Yeah.
But I think the conversation is so important. Conversation helps breed education.
1,000%. And yeah, paying it forward. And yeah, I'm so passionate about sharing everything.
Yeah.
I've learned. I don't want anyone to learn it. If one person doesn't have to learn it the way I did, then that's all I could hope for.
But I also think that's why we have to talk about the actual experience and the details. And that's why, going back to you mentioning that I spoke about that experience and those details of having a miscarriage, is like, yeah, nobody told me that you would potentially see the fetus come out of you. And I wasn't prepared for that as a result. It was an unbelievable shock. So I think, again, like having these slightly uncomfortable conversations actually can improve someone's experience.
Yeah, that prompts me to think, and I've had a few doctors on here, and I could probably have even asked my own doctor as to why she didn't explain that to me more clearly. Like, maybe one, does she not know? I would hope that she would know. Two, if you've never been through it, can you not explain? But I'm curious to know, why aren't they talking more openly about what we can expect?
I think there is still this layer of uncomfortability when it comes to these topics. I think that doctors tend to, generally speaking, lack bedside manner, and so sometimes these more sensitive, kind of experiences and points around it are just easily sort of brushed over. And I think it's really challenging to try and tick all the boxes. I sat at a dinner not so long ago with some incredible women who were just all, real sort of like pioneers and innovators in their space. And there was an interesting conversation that was happening with a scientist who was talking about developing a drug that would improve the way that we experienced menopause. And actually, she is doing some incredible work. The reason I bring this up is because there was someone around the table who had just had a hysterectomy. And what was so interesting was, here was this scientist who had, who has endometriosis, who had one of her ovaries removed and had very much had her own challenges with it, which you could obviously tell had really sparked her work and her focus.
Mm-hmm.
But she was clearly an academic, and she was speaking about her work very like pragmatically, rationally, and it was somewhat devoid of any emotion. And and there was this other woman around the table who had this hysterectomy the week before, and there was just this moment where I think you could feel that she was becoming increasingly more upset, and she did voice it. Mm-hmm. And the scientist was kind of proceeding to talk about her work and how no one should have to go through this experience of having a hysterectomy, and how she was developing this drug that would really help eradicate a lot of these issues that she had experienced. And in the end, she ended up, the lady who had the procedure ended up leaving the dinner, and she was incredibly upset. And it was just this really interesting moment where you had, on the one hand, this incredible, scientist with this academic brain who was really, she'd had investment from the Biden administration. She was doing incredible work, but she wasn't able to also tick the box of kind of sensitivity and perhaps emotional intelligence. Mm-hmm. And I just thought it was this interesting moment to sort of, emotional intelligence doesn't come easily for everyone. Yeah. And actually, sometimes And obviously some people tick all the boxes, but sometimes where there's an extremely high IQ, there's a slightly lower EQ. And I was sitting there thinking, it just made so much sense as to kind of why she got up from the table. And you could feel that she was becoming more and more uncomfortable. And I think in a lot of just like other environments, someone might have noticed it and just sort of tapered the conversation down. But it just interesting because, back to your point about a lot of physicians not being able to, sometimes people are just not able to. And when you're somebody that is like, has emotional intelligence, it feels so easy to talk about it.
That's
at the same time, like, I wish I was an academic who was being able to push drugs like she was forward. So I think it's just really interesting. We can't always be everything.
Yeah. And that's everything. And like, if you talk about relationships, friendships, not one person can be all things. So I love that point. One thing I'm thinking about as you're describing this dinner and sort of these two ends of the spectrum, is sort of an integration of everything. And in my journey, I have found there is like, at least this is what I have found. There is the Western medical world that is very procedure oriented, science oriented. And then you have the holistic space that will say very different things. And I have felt like there's two very different conversations happening in each side. And my deepest desire is to find some integration because I think both are very valuable and very useful, but I think we need to be meeting in the middle. And I think that could help a lot of things.
100%. And I think that approach to healthcare is definitely becoming just more popular, which is that holistic, integrative approach. And maybe, it's not possible for one physician to fill all roles, but the idea is that, as you say, that integration with, a general practitioner saying, hey, you should see this acupuncturist who can really support you in this way. We also have a nutritionist on the team, because I think in my experience with endo, and again, I'm now on the other side of 35 and it's been a while since, I first started experiencing endometriosis symptoms, but I look back on my experience and my journey, and nobody ever said to me, what does your nutrition look like? How are you eating? Have you tried an anti-inflammatory diet? Do you have a mindfulness practice? What does your movement look like? What do your stress levels look like now? And what were they like growing up? And so I think, functional integrative medicine is certainly becoming more mainstream, thank goodness. And I do think, it's the way forward. And very much the approach that we've taken at Looni into formulation. And, we have one existing product in market, which is our balance beam.
Yes, let's finally, I know we're almost out of time, but yes, I want to hear about your company.
Yeah, so we're a hormonal health and wellness company. Obviously started this company because of my journey with endometriosis, which I, spoken about already just during our conversation. But this has very much been the fuel to my fire. And my co-founder also suffered tremendously with her periods as well. Doesn't have a chronic menstrual health condition, but knows what it's like to, lie on the pavement in excruciating pain. And we currently have our supplement, which is our one existing product in market, which is called Balance Beam. And it's a blend of adaptogens, vitamins, minerals, nootropics. And this product is formulated to help support hormonal balance. And we've conducted a third-party study looking at different issues that really are bucketed as PMS symptoms. So cravings, hormonal breakouts, low mood, and all of the, challenges that we experience, and have been really encouraged just to just to suck it up and cope with them. And there are so many incredible botanically derived ingredients that can help support us. And we are also launching another product in October.
Oh.
Which is exciting, which is a topical and all-purpose rub. It's called the Rub, and it's for tender breasts, menstrual cramps, lower back pain. Like
amazing
ingredients in nature like arnica and ginger. And the idea is really we are helping people to establish a toolbox to support their hormonal health. So yes, we are developing tangible products that help to make your cycles, improve your cycles, but also encouraging people to lean on communities. So I'd love to share the link with you for our online community, because
yes, please do. And so we can share it. We can share it with the audience too. I'm so grateful for the work that you're doing and the advocacy and just cultivating communication and conversation around this, to the point of our conversation, the end of this conversation, there are still so many gaps, and we have to keep talking.
100%. And that's why I'm so grateful that you invited me on, and you are doing the work that you are, and showing up and having these conversations, which are incredibly important.
Thank you. Oh, and thank you. We'll share quickly here so people can also hear it, where they can find your products, more about the company, and then we'll also link it on our show notes.
So you can find us at looni.co, and we are on social as my.looni, and we will share the link to the online community as well. So you can share that if anyone suffers from a chronic menstrual health condition, wants to go deeper with their hormonal health and their cycles, or is experiencing challenges with infertility and trying to conceive, pregnancy loss, then it's a really, really beautiful group where there are resources shared, emotional support, and just, fostering beautiful community.
I love that. Connection is so healing, like you've said. So it's incredible. Thank you, Chelsea, so much for everything you shared. And even, outside of fertility, just sort of life perspective and, kind of aligning with self and listening, being more intuitive and hearing your inner voice. It's just going to be so helpful for so many people to hear this. So I appreciate this conversation so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for being here.
If you're someone struggling or relating to the topics that we're talking about now, and you're feeling the anxiety or the stress or the pressure of feeling like you're running out of time, you're behind, and you want some extra support, check out my group therapy practice in Midtown Manhattan, NYC Therapeutic Wellness. We have an amazing team of clinicians ready to support you in your journey, to help you feel more grounded, to help you feel more grateful, to help you feel like you're just exactly where you need to be. So check us out at www.nyctherapeuticwellness.com.
Hey guys, I'm Beth. Thank you so much for tuning in to Quiet the Clock. If you want to hear more episodes and learn more about how to dismantle societal timelines, live life on your own terms, live life fully and authentically, subscribe to our channel on YouTube, and you can also follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Quiet the Clock Pod. You guys, I'm really excited. We just created all this amazing merch. And so if you're loving the podcast and you want to support our cause and continue to hear amazing episodes, please support us by buying some merch. I am living in these sweatshirts every day. We have a range of colors. We have hoodies, we have mugs, we have hats, we have journals. We have all of the things, and I love having them on because it's just a reminder to quiet the clock, to slow down, to let life unfold and be happy. So there's meaning and purpose behind wearing it too, which is a nice reminder. So check out our website, quiettheclock.com, to get your merch.